When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing clinical social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 9, When a Mother Faces Carrying Life and Death in Her Body. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. I introduce you to our guest, Farah Nasser, a well-known evening news anchor on Global News. She is an award-winning journalist. Farah has covered at every government level, including the May 2018 Ontario provincial election debate. She was also on the ground reporting during major events such as the Toronto van attack, the G20 summit in 2010, and the Toronto 18 terror trials. Farah created notable buzz on social media as the force behind First Time I Was Called and Living in Color, 2 digital series exploring the experiences of marginalized peoples while giving them a voice. Farah is a TEDx speaker known for her talk titled The Power of Intellectual Humility. When she is not busy reporting daily news, Farah can be found volunteering in the community. She regularly speaks at community events and has worked with organizations such as Journalists for Human Rights, the Aga Khan Foundation, and the Economic Club of Canada. Hey, Farah, welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I've got to say, I still can't believe you're here, ready to dive into this conversation with me. I am super pumped to have you on today's show. And I'm especially thankful for your willingness to openly share and for your support in taking the stance with me to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an important thing, and I think the world is changing in many ways. And we talk about building better after COVID, and I think that this is one way, because we're seeing such a struggle when it comes to mental health, especially right now. And the great thing is people are willing to talk about it, which I think will help others in the future.
Yeah, we have like this crack in, so I'm trying to maximize on that for sure. And just to share a little with you about this podcast, it's all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And we know that no matter what the story is, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away. And so the platform here serves a way to break barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So here we are, just encouraging people to share and tell what people typically have reluctance for exposing or disclosing. And of course, I'm trying to set a new trend, and I like to call it mental beauty.
I like it.
Thank you. So Farah, are you still ready for a deep dive in conversation?
I'm ready.
Great. Let's dive in. So this first question, hopefully it doesn't stump you because you're a journalist. I think you can handle it. Please give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
Oh, my untold story. I think it's more like it's something to do with it's not what it seems, maybe something like that, just based on what people perceive when they see you and think that, everyone has their life together, but each one of us has a story and has struggles and deals with certain things on a daily basis. And so I think people, may perceive me a certain way in terms of motherhood and parenting and that kind of thing. But, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, as there is with, so many others as well.
Right, behind the scenes. And, from what I know about your story, you had this, as a mom, a simultaneous experience, having to have a precious moment that required you to create space for two extremes.
Yeah, certainly. I think it was, going through two things at once, like going through extreme joy and extreme pain, like, on two sides of a spectrum at the very same time, is a very unique struggle. Yeah, it's still with me. It's still something I live with every day.
Of course. So let's segue into your story. Farah, can you tell us more about what your untold story is all about?
Yeah, so I was pregnant in 2012, and I was pregnant with twins, which was a huge surprise, and obviously was very exciting. And found out that it was two boys, and we were just over the moon. And started kind of preparing, buying two cribs, buying a double stroller, doing all the stuff that most twin parents do. And then, planning, we decided to have a baby shower that was, not just for women. It was going to be like guys and girls, because we have so many people in our lives. And so we,
Right.
we wanted to kind of do essentially a joint shower for my husband and I, and so we're in the process of doing that, and putting it in invitations, mailing it invitations. And I remember thinking, it's going to be the three of us very soon. And then my husband was traveling, and I started not feeling the movement in one side of my body. It's both boys were very active in the womb, and I basically thought, could something be wrong? And any twin parent will tell you that they've had that feeling at one point, like, are they both moving? Because it's very hard to tell,
Right.
but you start getting really used to your body, and you start kind of feeling certain things. And there was a part of my body, the upper part, that didn't kind of move, that I didn't feel a lot of movement. So my husband was traveling. I had my girlfriend sleep over. We do this thing called Secret Things, where we get each other's gifts over the holidays, or favorite things, sorry, and then we give them to each other. So they were all staying over. And we had, girls' night. And I remember telling my cousin, who is a physician, and I said, Shane, I don't feel it. Like, there's something up. And she's like, Farah, you're so paranoid. Like, it's fine. You're fine. You're always worried about everything. And I am that kind of person who is always worried.
But up until that, you didn't have any complications, right? Like,
no,
up until that point in your pregnancy, there was no other anything to expect something different.
No, in fact, I was, working on the morning show on CP24. Like, I was, waking up at like 3 a.m. I was so active after work. I was
Right.
like working out. Like, I was really, for a twin pregnancy, I thought I was handling things really, really well. A lot of people are in a high risk category when they have a twin pregnancy. And the doctor, was actually like, I don't even just need to see you that much. You're doing great. You're going to carry it to term, no problems, So again, didn't have any indication that anything could go wrong. And and then so when I told my cousin that something could, that I was feeling something, that I was worried, and she said, you worry on a good day, like even before pregnancy, like just even about generally in life. I'm just one of these people who just, worries about everybody, worries about my family, just as, always kind of concerned and has to stop herself from going to the worst case scenario. So I just thought, okay, it's not a big deal. She said, look, when Reza comes back, my husband, she said, you guys go to the hospital. It's going to be fine. You don't need to go today. I said, yeah, you're right. So he came home, and even that, he came home on a Friday, I think. And he's like, let's go Saturday or Sunday. He's like, you've been to this hospital so many times. We've gotten checkups and stuff. It's always busy. Let's find a time that's not so busy. Anyway, we went, and again, totally thinking I was making something up in my head that wasn't true, and they couldn't find a heartbeat in the regular room where they put this band thing on you, and they could find it on one area, but they couldn't find the second twin. So they took me to do an ultrasound. And that's when the nurse told me that, the words that'll kind of echo with me, right? Like I can't, there's no heartbeat. And it was the biggest shock. It was so devastating. Like the nurse looks like she's going to cry. My husband and I are just, hadn't seen him cry in our entire
Right.
relationship until that
Wow.
day. And I just lost it. And I couldn't, I was kind of inconsolable. Like it was the worst moment of my entire life to this date. It was the absolute worst moment I had ever
Mm-hmm.
gone through. So it was really difficult. And I quickly said, like, okay, well, let's just deliver the other one. I need to get these kids out of my body. Like, I can't manage this. And the doctor said, no, there's no way you can't take your son out. Like it'll risk his life. Right.
Right.
So I was like, what do you mean? You mean I have to carry both of these babies? And he said, yeah, until you deliver, you got to carry both of them. And it just seemed so cruel, like just to, have to go through that. But we did. Yeah. We went through it.
And so when the nurse gave you that news, conveyed that message to you, what did you feel in your body?
It was just like I couldn't breathe. Like I just felt like I just was like, I was
Right.
struggling to catch my breath. Like it was just this, and then it was this kind of
Mm-hmm.
convulsing crying. And it's just, you're so connected. Like it's hard to explain because people think, well, you have another baby. Like you're so connected to these two individual beings, right?
Yeah. One doesn't make up for the other. They're both
Yeah,
special gifts, right?
totally, totally. But it's like, it's not even like you're connected to them as a sum. Like you're just like, okay, I'm pregnant. You're like, I'm pregnant with this kid and I'm pregnant with this kid. It's almost like two separate pregnancies at the same time
At
almost.
the
It's hard.
same time. Right. Right.
Yeah. So it's like he's gone, like one of them is gone. But I still have to have the other. Like how I just was like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. Like I just wanted the baby out. Like I was just like, I can't carry a baby who's passed away. Like I need to get him out. And obviously I couldn't.
I can't imagine, what I can't even try to fathom like what that was like. This struggle, what you went through. It's such a difficult chapter of having to move through. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how you did that and how you managed to do that. Now, when you were given all of this news and obviously you were in shock, so you were having these reactions, you couldn't breathe, struggling to catch your breath, devastated, inconsolable. What happened next? I mean, I know that you got all this information, like, no, you've got to carry to full term. What do you recall experiencing afterwards? Like just having to process and digest all of that.
I just was hoping it was a mistake. I think I still was like
Mm,
holding on, like maybe there's a chance. They kept telling me no, like it's gone, like the baby's not alive. And I remember, we walked out and I told my husband, I'm like, can we go back and double check that the heartbeat of the other one is still there? Because then your worry is like, because we didn't know how he passed away. So I'm like, what have
right.
I done? And it's this kind of,
What have I done? You had those questions starting
yeah,
to happen.
yeah. And
Okay.
so it didn't happen right away. I went to my mom straight because I told my husband, I'm like, we need to drive to Mississauga right now. I need to see my mom. And
Right.
we drove like right. And I think there I just started to kind of think, what did I do? And I was like retracing my steps. And I was thinking, when I was buying gifts for my friends for our big celebration, I was like running around town getting stuff from different stores and walking. I walked so much during that time. And I remember even feeling like, heavy and feeling like my body, I should stop. But I'm the kind of person who, like, even when I work out, like, I'm like, I'm okay. I can keep going. I can keep going. I need to push through this. So I just was like, it's fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's nothing's wrong, And I'm like, I should have listened to my body. I should have stopped. I should have done this. Did I pray enough? Like, was I praying? I shouldn't have worked. Why was I waking up at 3 a.m?
So you're questioning. As you're questioning yourself, all events, all the prior events, what and
Everything.
everything. And so I guess what I was curious about is when they said you had to still carry to full term, how many more weeks did you have?
So it happened at 24 weeks. And
Okay.
then they were hoping that the other twin would go to 40 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this now put the other baby at risk.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, you have to be in bed rest now. And you have to, obviously protect this other child.
Mm-hmm.
But the baby might come early, but there's a chance that you can go to 40 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were like, you just stay as long as you possibly can. Now, my son was born at 32 and a half weeks. So almost 33.
You stuck it out for another 8 weeks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 6 weeks.
Wow. And how did you manage those 6 weeks? Right? Because I remember you said, it was so cruel when you had to think about what you'd have to bear until birth.
Hmm. It was really hard. Like, thank God my family was amazing support, but you'd
Mhm.
still hear from people who were trying to be good intentioned, but would say things
Mhm.
like, at least you have the other one, be thankful, be grateful, you don't lose both. Or, I had an aunt who said to me, you're not the first woman to go through this. There's many women who have gone through this. And I think her intention was, at least you live in Canada, at least we have this. And I think her intention was kind of like find gratitude and, what you do have,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
did the op. I was so angry at her for saying that. Cause I'm like, I'm not thinking about other people. Like I'm going through this right now.
Right. It's like toxic positivity, right? So like I
Yeah.
get the whole gratitude and the intentions are always they're always well intended, but it's not very validating. It doesn't bring any hope to the circumstance when you're given those types of words of encouragement. They don't seem that
Yeah.
encouraging in the moment.
Yeah, certainly. And I kind of cocooned almost, and I found that in my life when I've gone through
Mm,
difficult times. I just kind of cocoon, like, and my
mhm.
husband and I just kind of, I just wanted to stay with him and my mom and like see my mom and dad, and that was it, my brother. But I
Mhm.
just couldn't, like I couldn't manage seeing, and friends kept wanting to see me and come by, and I just couldn't manage to be around people. So I don't really remember
Mhm.
much of it. I think I blocked a lot of the pain out.
Mhm.
I do remember making
Mhm.
some weird jokes and using humor, and like even my husband looking at me like, why would you say something like that? But I think it was just this, like, it was just maybe this coping mechanism.
It's how you manage the anxiety.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. It was really weird. And
Yeah.
then I remember there was one point where he just was like, we need to get out of here. And we went to Niagara on the Lake and we stayed
Mhm.
for the weekend. And he just tried to kind of change the atmosphere. But it was just, like, I wasn't sleeping at all. I was just thinking about this nonstop. Right. So that was
Mhm.
really painful. And I think there was also the physicality to it, which was like, when he comes out, because I have to deliver him, right? Like, and so I was really scared of that, delivering a baby who had passed
Yeah.
away, right? And been there for
Yeah,
a long
and
time.
that's what I was curious about too. If it's okay to ask, I was gonna.
Yeah.
My curiosity was about when your water broke and when you're in
Hmm.
labor, like
Hmm.
first of all, like did you notice anything different about your mindset? And then how did you like mentally prepare yourself for the moment beforehand, knowing that this delivery would be unlike any other?
Yeah, so I made my husband Google what it would look like, what a baby who had passed away when you had to give birth to a stillborn, what it would look
Mm-hmm.
like. Like, I think, and I told him, I go, just show me images that you think I can manage.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he's so great. He's like always my filter, even now when
Mm-hmm.
something's too scary or too deep or whatever, I
Mm-hmm.
make him deal with it first, and then like he can like filter it out and curate it for me.
Right.
So he kind of did that
Mm-hmm.
in this sense. And he said, okay, well, this is what it could look like. This is what it could look like. This is what you're going to go through. This is what might happen. And we kind of prepared in that sense. Now I
Mm-hmm.
had to go back to the hospital because they were really worried, I guess, about the delivery. So I was on bed rest in the hospital for maybe 2 weeks. And then I couldn't stay in the hospital. It was making things like, I felt even worse, like my mental, I needed
Right.
to be home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told them, like, please, like, let me just go home. And they said, okay, but you have to, stay put, and you still have to go to your regular appointments and whatever. Because then I was like having appointments like twice a week that the doctor would see me. And so we were like, okay. And then so I came home. My bag was literally still packed from the hospital. And that
Mm-hmm.
night, my water broke at
Oh my
home.
goodness.
Funny enough. Yeah. So we rushed back, and I
Okay.
didn't even pack really a bag because it was just this, we don't even, like, it was kind of this weird time that it happened. And then
Mm-hmm.
what happened next, like, we had couldn't have prepared for at all. And that was that I almost lost my life giving birth. So yeah, there
Wow.
was like trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma that happened during that time.
Right. Multi layers of trauma. Wow. And so, what was that experience like? I can't imagine what was going through your mind. What sorts of things do you recall? I mean, fighting for your life.
Yeah, so what happened was we rushed to Mount Sinai, and then we got there, and my OBGYN, who was the head of the department at the time, I think maybe still is, but he was away they knew of my situation, but they made a wrong decision, which he actually was really upset about. And a policy got changed at the hospital because of this decision. They didn't have a NICU bed for the baby because the baby was born early. So they were like, we need to move you to another hospital that has a NICU bed.
Okay.
So I wasn't even at the hospital I was supposed to be at. I was at another hospital that doesn't see these types of cases as often as a Mount Sinai. So it was St. Joseph's.
Right.
And there they did what they could, but what happened was I had this, so I delivered my son, which was, a great moment. And thankfully my entire family was there and that kind of thing. And then when my son who had passed away came out, I started bleeding, like hemorrhaging really bad. Because I guess the way it was explained to me, the area around the baby, it's supposed to contract after the baby's born. But I think because there was no life or no flow of blood or something, it didn't contract. So everything just kept gushing out, and they tried everything. And I had to get I think it was like a dozen blood transfusions. I was in the ICU for a week. I was unconscious. I almost died. So they told my husband, we have to give her a hysterectomy. They rushed my son to the NICU. So I didn't even get to see him. And thankfully, after a few days, he had signed that form that they were going to take everything out of me to just stop the bleeding because it was so bad. But thankfully they managed to figure it out, and they went inside and they were able to stop it. I had a surgery, but it was really touch and go for a period. And I missed, the first week of my son's life. And, it was a really, really difficult time. Now, before the hemorrhage started, while my one son was headed to the NICU, my other son, Hussein, who had passed away, they let me hold him. And it was just before the hemorrhage started. So I did get to hold him for a long time, but it was really weird how, it felt so good that he had come out. It actually was kind of I was like, okay, he's at peace. He's not stuck in there. It was weird.
Yeah.
It was like, he's not even alive, but I thought he finally got air, and I guess I got air, but he also felt really heavy in my arms. And it was really weird because he was so little. But yeah, he felt really heavy, and it was really tough. It was really painful to hold him, even though he wasn't alive. It was a really difficult thing. And, we all said prayers, and then the hemorrhage started and they took him. So yeah, it was a very, very painful and difficult experience. And I was out of it through most of it. But my husband, going to the NICU, having a wife in the ICU,
Yeah, he was like a superhero, and you braved so much yourself. What you endured and what you braved, what your body braved. Talk about resilience, how you managed, right? I'm a little speechless just hearing your entire story. It's quite touching, and it's such a brave story. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Farah, in the therapy room, I often find individuals when I see them, they're in one of three places in their life when they come see me. So either they're getting started on whatever part of the journey that they're ready to, tackle. Sometimes people are in the middle of it, and some are looking back at their journey and then trying to find ways to move forward or enter the next chapter in their life. What part of the journey would you say that you are in? Would you say that you're looking back, in the middle, or just getting started?
I think after I had my daughter, I think it became a lot more manageable. The pain was so intense for years, years. I would just cry for no reason. I couldn't even talk about it. I couldn't even, I'm so open talking to you right now about this. I couldn't even talk about it with my husband. I couldn't even, and then I had her, and I had such a beautiful birthing experience, which is what I wanted. Everybody was shocked that I wanted to get pregnant right away after, and I wanted to have another baby after going through all that. It wasn't even a question to me because I wanted my son to have a sibling, but it was such a beautiful experience that I went through the second time around. It was like God had just, or someone had just said, okay, she's gone through hell. We have to let her have this, euphoric experience with this second. And I think that kind of restored my faith in myself almost in a way. And I think because of that, my daughter's 5 now. And again, I just started talking about this year. So it still was very difficult to address and think about and manage
Sure.
and even help others. Like people called me and were like, can you help me? I'm going through this or something similar.
Right.
And every time I did, it would bring me back to a place of trauma. And I had to actually stop helping people for a while because it was just too much for me. But I think I still have to do a lot of therapy. I think there's still a lot to unpack, to be honest,
Right.
which I have to make time to do. But I think I can say that I'm close to the looking back part of it.
Right. And so what did that path of healing look like for you?
So originally it was just medication. It was a lot of medication.
Right.
There was a point I remember driving on the Gardner and just being like, I just want to drive off this highway. I know my son. I know my husband will take care of him. And I wasn't even thinking about them. I was just like, the pain was so
Right.
hard. It was like, I just was like, I need this to end. And I thankfully didn't obviously do that or do anything like that.
Of
But
course.
at that point, it was like, I need to be like, I can't manage this on my own. I need medication. So thankfully I was able to get that. I saw a psychiatrist and she was able to help me. And I had talked to a few people who had been on, antidepressants, and they had told me, you'll just make sure when you're ready to get off. Like your body will tell you when you need to get off. And thankfully I found that time and I was able to, I wasn't on for too long, but I would take them again any day if I needed, because it helped me so much. But I think the other thing that really helped in terms of my healing was group therapy.
Yes.
Like I did a lot of personal therapy, regular therapy, but I also did group therapy where I met women who didn't go through the same thing I did, because again, it's so unique.
So unique.
But had stillbirths and were able to understand the connection with a child that isn't born, because a lot of people, again, who haven't either been pregnant or gone through that because they're, their children are alive, they didn't really get that. So to have women who totally got that, and then to hear their stories that were even in ways like so much more tragic, I remember one woman who like saved all her money to get, IVF. She was in her early 40s and did everything. Her and her husband worked so hard to be able to do this before it was paid for by the government. And they had one shot and she was pregnant right till the end, great pregnancy. And then, her child didn't make it in birth. And then there was another woman who it was actually, she alleged, medical malpractice. She wanted a C-section. The doctor said, no, you don't need one. You don't need one. And eventually she was in labor too long and the child passed away. And to think that, you feel like you did everything right. And then because of a decision someone makes that you trust, this happened. So it's just, there was stories like that. And I just, I couldn't, and we went out for coffee and for lunch, these girls and I, after these sessions. And
That's
it was
so
just
great.
Yeah. And it was more than just sitting in that therapy room. It was also outside of the therapist, just talking.
The connections and, the power of group therapy, like as a clinician, I always have been like vouching for that and encouraging people to make that part of their healing. It's so therapeutic when you can relate to other people with similar experiences, even if it's not the exact, there's an angle there that you can relate to when the person's talking about their story.
Yeah. And I think you also are like, there's part of you that you wants to help them, right? So you're also doing this thing where you're like,
you're in it together.
Yeah. And, you're telling them you have every right to feel that way. Like you've gone through hell, and to be all
permission to speak and permission to like speak up.
That
and
validation.
The validation. That's it.
And they give it to you. And I almost felt guilty about being in that group because I was the only one who had a child, right? Like there was, a woman who lost, and she's reached out to me over Facebook because she remembers, like she lost three kids. So she'd gone through this time and time again. And so I was the only one with a little baby in that group. And I felt so guilty even talking about my child because these women didn't have, but they never made me feel like that. Like they never were like, you don't belong here, or, they were like, your story is worthy. All of our stories matter. And it just kind of gave me this, like, because again, a lot of people thought, well, you have one, so, and they didn't see it like that. They got it, and I was so thankful for that.
They got it.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that this experience opened you up in a completely different level of understanding, not just what it means to have stillbirth, pregnancy, but also the whole realm of mental health and how it impacts you in that way.
Yeah, I think how debilitating it is. And I think also the other thing that I really learned so much about is grief,
Mm-hmm.
how grief just comes in waves, how it hits you, how you behave in different
Mm-hmm.
ways, how like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, the world around you, because my husband and I had very different experiences too, right?
Right.
And that was the source of tension for a while too, because I just
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get over it. And he was like, we have another child. Like you have to figure this
Mm-hmm.
out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really difficult for a point. And then also having in our culture, having family
Mm-hmm.
members, not my mom, because she was so supportive through all this, but having family members who didn't fully get it and were like, okay, you have another baby, get over it. And it was just so difficult. And
That's difficult to process when someone says that to you.
yeah. And, it also made me realize, you also realize the people in your life. Like my brother was studying at Harvard and he took time off and he flew to Toronto and he was with me for like a month while my son was in the NICU. So,
Wow.
I'm going to visit this baby every day in the NICU, going through
Uh-huh.
grief, going through depression, not able to
Mm-hmm.
nurse. Like it was just all these things happening. And so him being there every single day with me was just, I will never, I thank him every time or every few times we speak. I'm always thanking him for that, because I think you really learn about people and you learn about how you can be better when people go through things. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
people teach you how to also help others. Like I have a friend who lost her husband recently. Like I don't think I would be able to be there for her in the same way if I hadn't gone through it myself, in terms of grief.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely, only because of my own life's journey that I've had several curveballs that have come my way. And I feel like I can relate to people better. I can understand and empathize with where they're at. And I can angle things differently because I've seen it, or I've been through it, or I can get a little kernel of it. And then there's a part of me that knows that because I went through something, or because I went through that part of that chapter in my life and I got through, that means someone else can also get through. It's like this inner knowing. So it really doesn't put me in a place of fear or worry or angst, or like, well, how am I going to help this person? So I never really focus on the outcome so much because I just know it happens. So I just really try my best to stay present with people and all in with the process. And so when you say like you learn about people and it helps you learn to be better to help others, that's true for me too.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, Farah, what would you say that you're grateful for since encountering this journey? These two different birthing outcomes. What are you grateful for?
Yeah, one thing I'm grateful for, I think, is the kind of appreciation I have for my children and my family. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we all, as mothers, that our kids are in many ways like such a big part of our lives, and
Mm-hmm.
really intrinsic to every part of our being as we walk through this earth, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
we just carry them at every single second, even when they're at school, we think about them, that kind of thing. I think it just gave me a greater appreciation of myself, of my body, of what my body can do, and of my son. I there was a therapist that said to me, your relationship with your son is going to be flawed. Like it's a troubled relationship from the start because of how you guys started your lives together, with this loss. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting because I feel like it's become more of a connection. Like we're the only two that knew him, and
Right.
my son, and I never wanted it to be something that surprised my son that he had a twin. And so I've
Mm-hmm.
been very open with him about it from the very beginning. There's never a time in his life that he didn't know about it. And same with my daughter now, who also kind of wants in on the action, but he feels like he has somebody there for him, in a
Right.
different way. And that's how I've essentially taught him, like, you're really
Yes.
lucky. Not everybody has someone like that. So I think
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, I am grateful, and I really do believe that my son Hussein, who passed away, I really do believe he's looking out for us. Like I don't know, I can't explain it. Like I know people who are not religious will like roll their eyes or whatever, but whether it's true or not, I as a mom, I can feel it. I can feel it when I'm going through a difficult time, when
Mm-hmm.
my kids are going through a difficult time. I know he's there and I know he's guiding us. And I picture him with my grandma, who I was really close to passing away, and her taking care of
Mm-hmm.
him. And that thought just gives me such peace and happiness, as does going to visit at the cemetery where he's buried. It just gives me such peace being there because I feel really lucky to have him.
The way you describe it, it sounds so soothing, to, like that feeling you describe. And then, the visual of, my grandma and him, they're probably hanging out, chilling together, and she's taking care
Yeah.
of him like that. What a reassuring and soothing feeling.
Yeah. And again, like I love talking to him. Like I still talk to him all the
Of
time, and I
course.
encourage my son to too. And
That's
it
great.
really, yeah, it helps me.
And maybe the therapist bringing the comment of, your relationship with your son could be flawed, perhaps because she brought that to your awareness. You made it your mission to make sure that that didn't happen.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, that's probably true.
If it's okay to ask, Farah, how do you honor your son and keep his memory alive? Are there rituals or tribute of some kind? I know you mentioned you still go to the cemetery and you talk with him. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that I do personally. Like my
Mm-hmm.
husband comes with me some years he doesn't. I do it every year on the anniversary of his death,
Mm-hmm.
or the day I found out, which was January 15th.
Mm-hmm.
So I go, I go all the time, and it's interesting because it's every year there's a different feeling. Like some days sometimes I drive there and I'm bawling, and then some it just brings me closer. But the closer and closer I get to his tombstone or where he's buried, like
Mm-hmm.
I just feel this like thing that's like pulling me to him. And when I leave,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've left him, and it's like, I don't know. It's a strange feeling. And it's such peace when I'm there. Like it's the most peace I
Mm-hmm.
feel ever, So that's something
Yeah.
that I really do. And I really enjoy, and I'm thankful that I have that. And I think just talking about him, like my kids really believe that they have another brother. Like they really, when
Mm-hmm.
they draw pictures at the first day of school, like I am looking at a picture right now of like, my son drawing, our family. And then in the air, there's an angel, and,
Mm-hmm.
he put H beside the angel, which is his brother. So I think we honor him as a
Mm-hmm.
family we talk about him almost every day. We think
Mm-hmm.
about him, and it's always in a really nice way. And they haven't come to the fact yet that's like, I wish he was alive. I wish he was with us, which I often fantasize about. Like I always think, oh, would be his bedroom. This would be where he'd go to school. This is the kind of car we'd have because we need another car seat. And, it's almost a
Right.
fantasy I have that isn't true and is never going to come true. But yeah, they're not at that point. They're at the point where it's like, we're just really lucky to have him. And he's part of our family. He's just in a different realm,
Yeah.
so to speak.
That's a really cool way that the kids, like, how your son, how he's able to sort of conceptualize it. It just seems so, again, very soothing, very calming that he has this ability to have this connection, and the way that it's honored. It seems so special, so unique and special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm sure there were lessons and learnings along the path. You've talked about how much you've learned and what you've learned about yourself and what you're grateful for. But during that time, you mentioned when you first got the news, there was the shock and the devastation. And then there's obviously different things that you experienced when you were on your way after your water broke, and also after fighting for your life. What sort of emotions did you experience?
Yeah, I think it was anger. Like I think the hardest one was anger, and
Mm-hmm.
guilt. I think guilt and anger were the two difficult ones. I was angry at others and myself. I was angry at others for what they were saying or how they moved on with life, or
Mm-hmm.
how like it's funny when you're going through grief, you're just like your life is so shaken, and then
Mm-hmm.
you look at other people. For me, it was my colleagues on TV, like where they're like, it's a morning show. Of course, they're going to
Right.
laugh and make jokes and like, but I'm like,
Right.
why are you laughing? Like, it was this weird
Right.
thing where I was like mad at everyone that their lives were okay, and they didn't understand. And I myself was cocooning, so it's not like anybody
Mm-hmm.
could, I wasn't even reaching out to anybody, but
Right.
it was in as much as they tried to reach out, I wasn't even calling people back. But that was the anger. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think the guilt was a real part, and it's still a part of me now. Like I still think
Mm-hmm.
about it all the time. I replay my steps. And I think that's the part in therapy I should probably deal with, because I still feel like,
Mm-hmm.
what did I do? What did I do wrong in that time? Or was it something I did in my
Mm-hmm.
life that like this is
Mm-hmm.
karma for? Or like there's so many emotions that
Mm-hmm.
I just think that, I still blame myself. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I know that like logically what happened, we found out that it was his umbilical cord that was tied around his neck. And it was this fluke thing that happens because usually when it happens to kids, they're able to kind of wiggle out, and
Yeah.
it rectifies, or they're born with it, but it's loose enough that it doesn't, harm them. But it happened
Mm-hmm.
twice to him. And then I thought, was he moving? Because I was because I was walking too fast? Was I, doing
Right.
too much exercise? Like, is that why he was moving? Was he uncomfortable? Did he not have enough space? What was going on that made him move like that and
Right.
not able to kind of rectify the situation? And I think that bothers me. Like that thought bothers me. Like, what could I have done?
Right. So still having that intense thought still produces a lot of different heavy emotions.
Yeah, I literally think of that at least, once a week, twice, sometimes three times. Often in the shower, I think about it. I'm just always
Mm-hmm.
like, what could I have done? What did I do?
Mm-hmm.
How did and my mom says, it's guilt is a wasted emotion. Like it's
Yeah.
not something you
She's
can do anything
smart.
about.
Yeah.
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 And it is in a way, but I guess I'll never have answers. And I wish I did. I wish I at least,
Yeah. It's the answers that you're looking for that, we don't always get to know.
yeah. And in this case, I'll never know. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've come so far, like with everything that you've described in our conversation today, even though you're recognizing like, oh, maybe I need to take this back to therapy or there's this piece I still need to work on. But just recognize and applaud yourself for how far you've come with that journey. With this journey, it's not a small journey and it had multi layers. And as you said, trauma after trauma after trauma. And processing and working through this kind of guilt is not one you can do so quickly or just with the snap of your fingers, right?
Yeah.
So, Farah, what's your key message to the listeners of the show? What do you think is important for them to know?
I think it's just be brave. And, if you have something, if you're dealing with something, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to like talk about it. It doesn't make you any less. Like it doesn't make you weak or wrong or anything like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
we all have a struggle. Like each one of us have a struggle that we're going through. We're
Mm-hmm.
all fighting a battle, like all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think we've come to a place in society where it's okay to talk about, to get help
Mm-hmm.
for, to talk to your
Mm-hmm.
employer about. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're lucky. We're lucky we're in a time where
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to discuss this. So that's one thing that I would say to people who are
Mm-hmm.
going through their own battle or their own struggle. Like, don't
Yeah.
be afraid to get help.
Permission. Yes.
Yeah,
Give
give
yourself
yourself
permission to talk about it.
totally,
Mm-hmm.
totally. And then conversely, for people who are looking at someone and in their lives right now and are maybe pissed at them or they're annoyed by someone, again, we are all going through our own battle and you know nothing about what the
Mm-hmm.
other person is going through. So be kind, show
Mm-hmm.
compassion. Really think about that you don't know. You're not an expert in their life, and
Mm-hmm.
you're an expert in your own life. Everyone's an expert in their own life, but you
Mm-hmm.
really don't know. So cut people slack. And that's during
Mm-hmm.
this pandemic and during this time, but
Mm-hmm.
that's all the time. Be
Right.
kind.
You never know what the other person's going through. You never know what path they're walking.
Hmm. Totally.
So, Farah, I'm curious about what is your game changer inspiration that's close to you that perhaps reflects your untold story? Is there like an inspirational quote or book or something that speaks to you?
Well, the one thing that it's kind of something you alluded to when you said, you can get out the other side of this. Like you've seen the other side of this when you've gone through your
Mm-hmm.
own curveballs in life. And that was something
Mm-hmm.
that, if I was to get a tattoo, it would be this, that, this too shall pass.
This too shall pass.
It is something that I say to myself all the time when I'm going through a difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember nursing my son and in the middle of the night and bawling, out of grief. And I just thought I should tattoo this on my hand because I just have to keep reminding myself this too shall pass. Like we're not going to go through this forever. Everything
Mm-hmm.
changes. Things will change. You'll
Yeah.
grow. Time
It's not
helps so
permanent.
much.
Yeah.
No, nothing is permanent. And
Mm-hmm.
so to me, even with work, when I'm going through stuff and having a difficult time with a story or feel really connected to a story that I can't get out of my head or whatever, I have to keep telling myself that. And it really helps me.
Mm-hmm. Great. I mean, it sounds like this has been your mantra that helps you get through. So, as long as it works, that's the best. And I think that this could be a quote that other people, after listening to this episode, may also incorporate into their regular routine, which I think would be awesome. Farah, is there an organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that perhaps you'd like to give a shout out to, or one that you're aware of now that maybe you didn't know about then that feel would be a good to give a shout out to?
Yeah, like I just I think the one thing that the people that helped me were in the NICU and the neonatal ICU, and not just at, St. Joseph's where I was, but like Sinai. Like these nurses and doctors, man, they they help the littlest, in the most
Mm-hmm.
difficult time, but they also help parents. Like it's just crazy what parents, what you go through at that time when you're in it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one. And then just any group that deals with maternal loss. Like I haven't really done any work with any charities or anything like that in
Mm-hmm.
terms of
Mm-hmm.
this. Like I said, I just started kind of talking about
Mm-hmm.
my story, but um,
Right.
yeah, and in terms of like, not an organization, but maybe it's just a day of honoring people and going easy
Yeah.
on people that have gone through this. Like I just the comments Chrissy Teigen got, this earlier, was it this year, last year,
Mm-hmm.
when she went through the loss of her child. Like it was just like people
Mm-hmm.
they don't understand. Like people are so quick to judge, and we all go
Right.
through things and deal with things in different ways. And I think we have to be a little bit more, again, compassionate and kind and open-minded, when people are going through things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. For knowing that you have a solid presence on social media, what social channels are you comfortable providing should someone want to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, people can connect with me through Twitter at Farah Nasser, or Instagram at Farah Nasser Global. Either one of those. Yeah, I'm happy to chat.
Amazing. That sounds really great. Farah, you just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you for the very thoughtful questions.
Farah, thank you for your willingness to do this. It was such a meaningful conversation to have, especially sharing with the amount of vulnerability that you showed up with today and how you've reframed your turmoil and embraced a way to move forward. It has been my honor to speak with you today.
Oh, likewise, likewise. It's really important work you're doing, and I hope it gets traction.
Thank you. And I thank you again, Farah, for being a part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma.
My pleasure.
To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.